Hey, great to have you here. So back today with another horror movie review video, and this time we're going to be talking about Thanksgiving. So this was a movie I was pretty excited for. I've seen it once previously a while ago, and then I just rewatched it recently. So this is a film, I feel like it fit like a perfect theme that I would be interested in. Really like the Scream movies, and this is kind of a similar whodunit type of situation with a little bit more parody maybe. Well, Scream does a lot of that too, but this one kind of mocking the Thanksgiving season and like the whole Black Friday traditions. Overall, this felt like that kind of fun, trying to figure out who the killer is type of film. And for the most part, I think it winds up being. I will say it probably didn't live up to my expectations as far as me thinking this is a great film that I would enjoy. It still hits a lot of marks though, and is overall just a really fun movie, I would say. So as far as just kind of the theme of this video, I would say Thanksgiving is a fun horror movie to watch. It doesn't do a lot of things great, but it doesn't do a lot of things poorly either. It just kind of, you're along for the ride and you're enjoying it is the gist of the film. And I think that's what it's meant to do. So we start off in this movie. By the way, there'll be some spoilers here. A lot of these movie review videos will have some of those, so be warned of that if you haven't seen the film. But you have the beginning starting off with a Black Friday situation where you have the owner of the store, I think his name is Mr. Wright, and it's supposed to be kind of like mocking Walmart in my opinion. So you have Wright Mart is the store that he's running, and you see his family around him and so forth, and he has his kids who are going out and messing around. And I don't think you're supposed to really like any of the kids because they're kind of your typical spoiled, and you just want to see them meet their demise, and maybe that's the point too. You're not really supposed to like a lot of these characters, probably for a good reason. And then you have a separate family who's more of the working class frontline employee, where you have the dad is going to work at the Wright Mart and leaving his family from Thanksgiving, goes to do that. And then we have the kids that are from the more wealthy family running around, and they go into the store early because it's their dad's store. So all of them go in there, and they're just kind of your obnoxious jock type of characters. I think they're more baseball players. It seems like a little expectations a little bit not fully met with. I think the star pitcher is one of the characters named Bobby. I don't think he seems to be that tall of a character. I feel like pitchers normally tall, but maybe you're not supposed to look that much into it, and it is a high school kid in theory, so you never know. So they go in there and they go early, and they're like yelling at each other, and you have these two different high school teams that are very much rivals. So it's your very stereotypical like small town, hate the other school type of situation. And then you have, as I said, the kids go in the store early, they're messing around, and everybody's on their phones and recording stuff, so it's your modern era kind of mocking that as well. And eventually the mob outside is trying to get in to do their Black Friday shopping, and they're all at the door, and they tell the one security guy, hey, go unlock the door, let the people in. And then the other security guard runs off. We'll see him later on, but the guy goes to the door, he's gonna go unlock it. You see the glass start to crack, and the door is falling on top of him. Everybody barges in and squishes in. You see one guy like run in, and somehow he cuts his neck on this shard of glass that was just sticking out. He goes to grab like an item, and he's like dying, but he still has it in his hand. I think somebody grabs it from him later on. It just kind of really mocks the Black Friday shopping tradition that people indulge in. I think these days things are more online than they have been in the past, but there's probably still some of that rampant shopping that goes on. You have all chaos breaking loose, and you have the wife of the guy working in the store show up with the sheriff. They just came to support him. So they're there, and the sheriff kind of runs off a little bit, and the woman's just in the middle of this stampede. She gets knocked to the ground, and you see two people butting heads with a shopping cart, and they crash into her head. And I think her hair gets even caught on one of the carts and like drags part of her skin away. So it's pretty gross to see that interaction, but it just shows none of the people doing that see her suffering on the ground. It's just they are so tunnel vision into buying the thing they need to buy, and that's it. So really mocking the Black Friday situation. Then the owner sees his wife. He's like traumatized. And there's also the baseball player I mentioned, Bobby, is kind of the main male kid in the movie, I would say. Him and Ryan are the two, but Bobby's in there. He falls to the ground when he's trying to help, I think, the security guard who's dying out at that point. And he gets his hand stepped on. Obviously, baseball player, big situation there. I think he winds up breaking his wrist, something like that, where he can't pitch anymore ultimately based off of what took place. Then you see the sheriff run in. He sees the woman dead on the ground. That's the wife of the store owner, and he just like freaking out. He shoots his gun in the air. And then we transition to current times. So that's kind of your kickoff prologue to the movie, if you will. And I feel like watching this upon second time after knowing the outcome of, as far as definitively knowing who the killer is, I caught on to a lot more things the second time, and I'm like, this probably should have been way obvious. Upon first watch, I thought the killer who wound up being the killer was the killer. I just wasn't sure of the motive. And watching on second watch, you really see little things slipped in. They're like, oh, they like to cook. Oh, they are here for this reason. And then they freak out for certain reasons. So there's a lot of things that take place watching it upon a second time that you really pick up on. That's like, oh, that's a good situation now that you know. But in the moment watching the first time, you don't fully realize a lot of those things. So we fast forward time. The kid who was the pitcher has left. He's just kind of vanished for now for the last year. And we're the next Thanksgiving time once again. So I really like, one of the positives I will point out, I like the fall vibe of this movie. It really puts you in the theme of Thanksgiving or just fall in general. Like it could even be Halloween type, just that, especially like East Coast type of fall weather just overall. Really enjoyed the ambiance that they put you in that setting. So as we fast forward in time, then we have, it's kind of a cool transition to do. I think it was intentional, where you have the woman who was fighting with the shopping cart that killed the wife. You transition to her just being like working at a diner, and she's just like all jovial. And I think it's supposed to probably show a little bit of the dichotomy that people have. Like she was very kind and stuff when she was at the diner, but then you have her just 2 seconds prior, like killing somebody over some merchandise. So that's kind of a funny twist they show, where it's like, oh, you just did this, now you're a great person. So a lot of times people will act like they're like nice, great people, but then their truth comes out in various other ways. So you have them in the diner. You see these masks, these like John Carver masks that they're giving out. It's kind of like the pilgrim-y type look. And you have the two cops in there looking at him. And then you see Patrick Dempsey's kind of the most popular actor in this movie. You see him like, oh, everyone's going to be wearing these type of thing. Once again, maybe should be a little bit foreshadowing there. And then we cut to the kids, and just they're a little bit more conflict than previously. Like the one kid has recorded all of this in the past, so the girl's not a big fan of it. And it feels like the girl of the guy who owns Right Mart, she is probably more morally like concerned about the situation. So she's kind of like the ethical, like, hey, this isn't right. Even though my father owns this, I'm not entirely in alignment with that. So cool to see that as far as the character variation and development there. And they're trying to like shoot a new video for the store, and she's really against that. So it feels like she's the only one that's really challenging a lot of these customs of Black Friday and just massive merchandise sales and these great, promotions and consumerism ultimately. So a lot of stuff just takes place with a little bit of character development that we get with, she's with the new boyfriend, Ryan, and then there's like a nerd that they make fun of, and then he writes the paper for one of the jocks, and then the jock gets kind of like fooled because it's a paper that the teacher wrote in a blog. So just a lot of backstory with some of these characters. We flesh them out a little bit more because from the beginning we just saw them yelling, just being total buffoons. So a little bit more depth. Some of them are still pretty surface level characters, but either way, as far as kills go, I will mention the first one I believe is the woman that killed the wife. So she is working at that diner and things are closing and she's getting attacked. She gets her face like put on the freezer, I believe, and it gets like her skin ripped off. She's like trying to access her iPhone and she has Face ID and it's not working. I don't know why there wouldn't be like a secondary option, like another password, or how the skin ripped off the face wouldn't recognize your face, or I think it's mostly the eyes most of the time. So either way, well, we're supposed to be having fun with the movie, so I won't criticize it too much, but she can't access her phone. She winds up going out to the car, can't find her keys. Turns out John Carver is in the car and he starts it. And she's running and he crashes into her right as she tries to jump into the dumpster. And this is a very, it's a very obvious, just practical effect look to it. She jumps in the dumpster. She's like half in it. He crashes into the dumpster, which shakes it, and the top of it comes down and slices her body in half. It looks super fake, but honestly, I partly appreciate that in this movie. Like, a lot of the kills don't look like real human bodies, what they would do and what they would look like, but sometimes I prefer that. Some of the really gory stuff that looks like, hey, that's really a person, that's sometimes challenging to watch. So I almost enjoy the over-the-top, like clearly this is not a person at any point in time, that I feel like this movie does a little bit more, and that's just my opinion maybe, but it felt like she didn't look like she really got cut in half. Like, it looked like some clear effect of just slicing. You see like red strings from her body that was connecting the two parts. So really cool scene there. Then we fast forward. She's like up on the right marked sign with half her body, and you see the sheriff show up. He's like, "Hey, cover that!" And it's just like trying to look very innocent, I would say. And we have them do that. Fast forward a little bit. We have the security guard who bailed that night the year prior, and he's trying to leave. He ultimately gets his head cut off. I think it's one of those like wire type things where it cuts his head off. He gets put on the head of the table. So that throughout this time, there is the kind of rebuttal of John Carver where he has his own social media account and he is showing these dead bodies there as well. And he's posting them from places that he didn't do the crimes. So it's harder for them to track down. Like, he'll take a picture and he'll then post it from a certain location. So then they think that's the location he's at. Turns out that's just where he posted from. And then later on, they also do, oh, here's the video live feed, but he's doing a live feed of a monitor that's held elsewhere. So a lot of like staying one step ahead of the police force as far as, here's where you think I am. Actually, this is just a decoy spot that I'm using. So then there's a few other kills that take place. This is one that felt like kind of really obvious that this was the killer on second watch, at least. You see Bobby winds up coming back. So you're kind of suspecting maybe it's Bobby, maybe it's Ryan, the other that Jessica's dating, because he's acting a little sketchy and he's getting a little heated as well. They're at the school together when Jessica's friends have been kidnapped and she's like been terrorized. And I think this may even be when the rivals get killed as well. You have the jock who gets his neck snapped in half, and then you have the girl who's like jumping on the trampoline and she's just getting knifed from the bottom of it. So pretty mild kills there overall, but was fine. That happens shortly after. They're at the school. Bobby and Ryan are fighting, and Jessica's breaking them up, and the cop is there. Jessica told the sheriff, hey, these are two people that were at the scene who led to the chaos happening. So Jessica's kind of feeding the information to the sheriff throughout the movie because she has the footage from a year ago that I don't know why the CEO wouldn't have deleted that, but he still has it on some like backlog computer. She's grabbing screenshots and giving it to the police. And every time she does that, it feels like things happen afterwards. Like, she gave the shots of those two people, the cheerleader and the jock. Right after she does that, those two characters die. So that felt like a little bit obvious that, okay, you gave this to the sheriff. Now these characters are dead. Maybe the sheriff is involved in it. So that one was a little bit probably too revealing. But as pointed out, you have then Bobby and Ryan at that school and they're fighting. Then you have the sheriff say, hey, Bobby, Ryan, I better not see you at the parade. You better not be there. So he gives them a reason not to be there so that when somebody is doing something in a mask, you are left to believe maybe it's one of them. So very cheeky little tactical move by the sheriff saying, hey, don't show up. So then we just see the other characters that aren't those two. It leaves you to believe maybe one of those two is the one that did it. Good approach there, but they have a plan to catch the killer, and it's like involving the parade. But the problem is you have the killer in on the plan, so he's one step ahead of the situation. You ultimately have Thomas Wright, Jessica, Gabby, which is one of the friends. I'm kind of bouncing around timeline, so I apologize, but you also have a few other kills I want to call out. The blonde girl, who's one of the friends, she gets stabbed in the ears with, ironically, like the corn holders that you have, those little like pokey corn holders. She like pulls out her headphones, she gets stabbed in the ears there. And John Carver also is like taking out the security guy and the dad with his silencer pistol. So just a lot of quick kills that take place there. And the friends see it, so they're like trying to rush over, but she's clearly not going to survive. You also have the wife of the CEO who is being cooked in the oven. She has a bit of a chase scene that takes place where she's hiding and she's trying to get away, but she winds up getting caught ultimately from there, and she runs out the door and gets like the little fork thrown at her and she gets dragged back in. So she gets cooked in the oven, which is pretty gruesome. You don't see a whole lot of it, but it's kind of a gross scene later on. So fast forward to the ending where I said all these people got captured. They're at the dinner table and you have the wife on the table, like set up like a turkey, and you have her head cut off. Her head's on a plate in front of her husband, the CEO guy. And he's like puking in his mouth. He just can't stand this. And then John Carver's giving this whole spiel about the situation, and he's like cutting off a leg or part of the leg of the woman and like gonna feed it to Thomas Wright. But this whole time, Jessica, the main girl, she has this ring that she got from one of the other characters that has like a little bit of a sharp point to it, cuts her hands loose, and then cuts loose, I think his name's Scuba, the other friend who's there. And then they attack Carver and trying to run off. Scuba gets like slashed, and then Jessica runs, and Carver chases after her. She gets away. She then sees the sheriff on the ground who's knocked out. And then when we go inside, we see Bobby with the mask on, and she's like, oh, it's Bobby. And the sheriff comes, he's like, I'll take care of it. Does some shooting, comes back. We fast forward time to everything's been kind of resolved. Like the people are now safe, and Jessica's in with the sheriff, and she's like traumatized, and they're all going to the hospital to take care of the other friends, and it's just her and the sheriff there. And she looks and sees his pants. He has some of the plants that are on her foot as well. So she's like, you're the guy that she's like putting two and two together that she was chased by him. He is Carver. And points out like the small details are what you're supposed to remember. And then the sheriff looks down. He sees that he has that too. And he realizes that she knows. He starts like confessing everything to her. And turns out she took a phone from one of the like evidence bags and is live streaming all of this. So he just said all this on live stream. So he's cooked at this point. He can't do anything to save himself other than try to run away and maybe kill her for his own satisfaction. But he chases her around the room. Bobby comes in and saves her. So Jessica and Bobby get away, and they're being chased still by him in kind of this warehouse police headquarters vibe. And they're trying to figure a way to get out. Fast forward, they wind up taking a vehicle, and there's some altercations between the two, but they wind up ultimately shooting this explosive that blows everything up, and Patrick Dempsey, the sheriff, gets like blasted somewhere. And then we just fast forward again, and they're like recovering from it, and they're like, oh, I don't see him. I don't know where he went. And we see a firefighter come out with a mask on. It's presumed it could be him. I think they are doing a Thanksgiving too, so that'd be cool to see. Obviously, if we keep it with the same characters, the whodunit maybe isn't as relevant because Patrick Dempsey's clearly bad if he's in it again. But maybe they'll have somebody else in it too. Who knows what that'll look like. But either way, that's how it concludes with Jessica and Bobby surviving the altercation, and then the John Carver sheriff getting away and not knowing where he went ultimately. So a little bit left open for future, but it's tolerable as a standalone movie too. As pointing out the pros, as I mentioned, the kills are fun. They're kind of unrealistic and goofy looking, but I still enjoy it. It's a fun time of year film. As far as whodunit, it does it pretty well. Even after rewatching, I picked up on new things, being like, oh yeah, that should have been obvious from there. So it's still enjoyable after you know. I will say the final line of it is pretty great, or the final line of at least the altercation is Patrick Dempsey just yelling, there will be no leftovers, which is just hilarious. There'll be no leftovers for Thanksgiving. It's a fitting scene for a slasher movie, but also a Thanksgiving movie. So love that. And she recites it back to him afterwards at one point. So as far as any of the cons, not much depth to some of these characters or really the plot overall. It's somewhat a predictable killer just because it's kind of between him and then Bobby and Ryan. And I didn't feel like it was either of those characters, especially Bobby, because they're kind of trying to hammer him too much. Maybe Ryan could have been an option, but even him at one point, they hammered him a lot. So you could have probably predicted it. The motive, maybe you wouldn't have predicted. So his motive is he was secretly seeing the wife of the guy who works in the store, and he had a relationship with her, and she got killed. So he is out for revenge and all these people that were involved in it. So the motive I didn't see because you really wouldn't have known that otherwise. I mean, maybe them coming in together, but the motive was a little bit, had to be told at the end. But as far as who did it, you could say, okay, he did it. We just don't know necessarily why other than him being frustrated. He even kicks off the movie with them shooting like very angrily in the ceiling. So that's maybe predictable. Overall, as a whole, I would say this movie is a fun movie. There's not a whole lot of depth to it. It does what it intends to do. It's here for a fun, fall vibe, horror, whodunit, just fun time to have. As I said, the description of this movie is probably just fun to be had. I'm curious, the guy who owns the Wright Mart, Thomas Wright, he was in another Eli Roth movie in Hostel, so I'm wondering if he's an actor that Eli Roth likes to work with or not, but he's really the other recognizable face I had in this other than Patrick Dempsey. So overall, thought it was a strong film. As a score goes, I'm going to give this a 5 out of 10, which may seem low because, as I mentioned before, a lot of times 7 is viewed as being average. The scaling I like to use is 5 being average just because that allows more variation in scores. So I'm going to give this one a 5 out of 10. But but it's one I really enjoy for kind of the fun aspect of it. It's not something I would overly recommend, not one of my favorite movies or anything like that, but you're not offended by watching it. It's a good time to enjoy. So 5 out of 10 for this one. So that's my thoughts. What are your guys' thoughts on Thanksgiving? What are your thoughts on the potential sequel for it? Just would love your feedback down below. Appreciate you guys so much for watching, and hope to talk to you again soon.